and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at. A lot of sunshine in this week's forecast, what that means for Chicago's historic drought conditions.
There's certainly confusion and fear now.
As the governor scales back health care for undocumented immigrants, he's getting pushback.
A torture justice memorial is among the new monuments to be built in Chicago thanks to a multi-million-dollar grant.
Made from a material that will outlive probably everyone in this room.
Art meets sustainability in a new partnership on the West Side.
Back in the day, like, oh, maybe we'll make it big. It's not even like important.
And we tell you about a record label offering guidance to local artists.
And now to some of today's top stories. Interim Chicago Police Superintendent Fred Waller today addresses the high rate of gun violence over the holiday weekend. According to Chicago Police Department data, 75 people were shot, 13 fatally over the three-day Father's Day and Juneteenth holiday weekend. Waller made remarks at the Bright Star Turn Community Outreach Center on the South Side. He acknowledged the difficult numbers, but also touted successes, saying that major events in high-trafficked areas were safe throughout the weekend.
We saw some success this weekend in some of our most high-trafficked areas, like the lakefront and beaches. But there's more work to be done as we make progress in our city's most vulnerable communities.
A coalition of black leaders is fighting to keep the doors open at a troubled charter school. The group is calling on the governor and mayor to keep urban prep academies in business. That's a nonprofit organization that runs all-boys charter schools in Englewood and Bronzeville. The Chicago Board of Education voted to remove the organization's charter due to allegations of sexual and financial misconduct. But the assembled leaders today say the school is being unfairly targeted and should remain open because it traditionally has had a very high college acceptance rate among its students.
So if the leading issue here in the city of Chicago is crime, and education is the way forward to reduce crime, then why is it that they're going to close a school like Urban Prep as opposed to duplicate Urban Prep? We don't need to see fewer urban preps, we need to see more of them.
Pediatricians and the Chicago Fire Department are reminding parents to keep kids away from fireworks as the 4th of July holiday approaches. Emergency room doctors say they've seen too many fireworks-related injuries, ranging from lost appendages to face and eye injuries.
And I've seen kids with severe burns involving large portions of their bodies that require hospitalization and can cause significant scarring, which can be very traumatizing to a child. What makes treating these injuries so hard for me is that so many of these are preventable.
The fire department demonstrated how quickly clothing can go up in flames. The Consumer Product Safety Commission reports a 25% increase in fireworks injuries over the last 15 years. The groups remind families to leave fireworks to the professionals by attending public displays.
Chicago Public Schools is making sure students have access to breakfast and lunch this summer, even though school is out. The district is launching its Summer Meals program at hundreds of schools across the district for students enrolled in CPS summer programming, as well as students who just live nearby. Kids 18 and under can also access free meals through the district's Lunch Stop program, even if they're not enrolled with CPS. For more on how to find these locations, you can visit our website.
Coming up in just a bit, health care for undocumented immigrants is under fire.
But first, what's behind our very dry summer? Not that everyone's complaining. Right after this.
It's gorgeous.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
All the signs of summer are here except one very notable one. We have yet to experience one of those classic big summer thunderstorms. In fact, the Chicago region is in the midst of one of its worst droughts in decades, and it's not expected to let up anytime soon. I mean, nobody's complaining about abundant sunshine, of course, but what accounts for the paucity of rain and what potential economic impact could it have? Joining us with more is Kevin Burke, a meteorologist at the National Weather Service. Kevin Burke, thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. So put this into perspective for us. How historic has this drought been?
Good evening. Yeah, this drought has been quite remarkable of late. Really going back to since the first part of May, just the last 45 to 50 days or so, we've been looking at only about 20 to 30% our normal rainfall for this time of year. And really, when you start the season out dry like that, the ground just starts to dry up in a big hurry. You know, you get that sunshine, very little cloud cover, and it really just starts to dry things out. So looking back at the climatology, we're on pace with some of the driest years on record. The drought of 1988 and even the more recent drought in 2012, we're basically on par with that right now in terms of our deficits.
And we're seeing that those parched lawns and park areas. So Kevin, why are we in this drought? Simple question. What's the science behind this?
Sure. Really, the atmosphere, the flow patterns in the mid and upper levels have just been very stagnant. We've really been in a pattern where the better flow and moisture to produce, our typical thunderstorms this time of year has been well south. You may have heard the big severe weather events they've had across much of the Gulf Coast in recent days. That's really where a lot of the energy has been focused of late. And, further north into our region, we've been kind of stuck in the doldrums in a sense with very little moisture or energy to support a lot of precipitation across the area.
And I know folks that love to do outdoor events or go to baseball games are not complaining. No rain delays, no rainouts, anything like that. But there's a cost here on crops and wildlife, especially species that rely on wetlands. So how impactful is this drought on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking at some of our area streams and rivers across the area, even soil moisture, we're looking at near record levels right now. And some streams are barely flowing at all, some of the smaller streams. So this is really starting to impact the groundwater and the moisture and water we see in our streams as well.
And, I was watching some of the various weather reports today. There's no real significant rain event in the immediate forecast. What do you predict over the longer term, the next week or a couple weeks? Are we going to get out of this?
Yeah, our next chance of any rainfall across the area looks to be Sunday. There's, as we head into the next week, we might start to see a little bit more activity. But just looking at things right now, or not seeing anything that's going to, in a sense, take us out of this drought anytime soon. Just to give you an idea, we average this time of year about 0.15 of an inch of precip a day, which equates to roughly an inch a week every 7 days. So just to keep up with normal conditions, we have to have an inch of rain every week. And really, it looks like we're not going to quite be doing that even with our chances of rain coming up. So it's likely these drought conditions are going to continue, at least for the foreseeable future.
And how devastating could that be if this continues for weeks and months on the things you were mentioning before?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, crops across the region are already starting to struggle. Just driving across, coming into work, I can see some of the crop fields. They are starting to show signs of the dryness. And if we continue this trend with very little rainfall, that could really impact yields as we head forward here through the summer season.
Certainly farmers' livelihoods depending on the skies opening up a little more than they have been so far. All right, Kevin Burke, thanks for explaining all this to us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And now we go back to Brandis and why healthcare for undocumented immigrants is being scaled back. Brandis.
Paris, thank you. Illinois is one of the few states that provides healthcare benefits to undocumented immigrants. But the state is beginning to scale back that coverage, and it's causing a political rift. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Yeah, Brandis, Illinois isn't just one of the only states to provide health care for undocumented adults. It was actually the first, but doing so is proving costly to the point that the state is scaling back. Illinois separately provides coverage to undocumented children up to age 18. Under a program that began in 2020 and has expanded since, the state now also covers adults ages 42 and older. These undocumented immigrants and green card holders of less than 5 years are not eligible for federal Medicaid benefits. Latino lawmakers and other advocates this year tried to grow the program to include all low-income adults. Instead, the opposite is happening. On Friday, Governor J.B. Pritzker's administration announced changes, among them an enrollment pause. When the new fiscal year begins July 1st, eligible residents aged 42 to 64 won't be able to sign up. The state is going to cap at 16,500 the number of seniors who can be enrolled, and everyone enrolled will have to start paying copays of $100 to $250 for hospital visits. Tovia Siegel and her organization are fighting those changes.
There's concerns about people who don't know this program exists and will show up at the hospital needing cancer care or other acute care and would have been eligible for coverage and now won't be. And so there's certainly confusion and fear now.
She says to make the argument that it's all about cost saving is nonsense because in the long run, she says giving especially vulnerable people access to preventative care saves money. She says something else is at play.
I think the narrative around not being able to spend money on healthcare, and especially healthcare for the state's most vulnerable, does come from a place of anti-immigrant sentiment and believing some people are more worthy of healthcare than others.
She has lots of allies in that fight. Latino lawmakers, city council members, and other groups are likewise critical, saying Illinois and Governor Pritzker have turned their backs on promises of being a welcoming state. But Republicans like State Senator Dave Severson say this is a cost Illinois can't afford to take on its own.
If you're the only state and the only country that says, we'll take the sickest of yours, send them to us, it will bankrupt our state. And it'll mean we won't be able to help our most vulnerable population. It means our seniors are going to wait. Our disability community is going to suffer. The people that we have that have cancer and heart and other issues, with their insurance costs going way up to cover this, they're suffering.
Now, to that end, he agrees with Siegel, actually, that folks may not be able to afford the new copays. But he says they're going to still go to the doctor. It's just that healthcare systems will have to swallow those costs.
What we're seeing is just a movement from the state of Illinois budget, state of Illinois taxpayers, is now instead going to be moved to hospitals and healthcare providers who are going to be hit with hundreds of millions of dollars of uncompensated care, which they are going to have to then pay most likely by cost shifting it on to everyone that has insurance.
Amanda, you mentioned that there's been a lot of political pushback for Pritzker. Will that make a difference?
Well, the governor is in a tough spot politically because he had touted this program originally, but now his administration projects that costs were going to top over $1 billion. So these new limitations, not a surprise. Legislators gave Pritzker the authority to make these cuts and rollbacks as part of the budget deal that he signed just a couple of weeks ago. Still, by pushing back publicly, these organizations are really allowing the governor to wear the political jacket. Now, Pritzker's team says, however, the program still a success. Tens of thousands of people, they say, who wouldn't have had any health care coverage do now. And they point out that is a far cry from when the state was in a fiscal implosion a couple of years back. And meanwhile, Brandis, advocates like Healthy Illinois say that they are working as hard and quickly as possible to get folks signed up before that July 1st enrollment deadline comes.
I'm sure they are. Amanda, thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, details on 8 new monuments coming to Chicago. But first, a look at the weather. 8 years after it was promised, city officials say a memorial honoring the black men tortured by former Chicago Police Commander John Burge will finally be built. The memorial is one of 8 new monuments that'll be funded by a multi-million-dollar grant from the Mellon Foundation, announced yesterday as part of the city's Juneteenth celebration.
The impact that it's going to have, it's not only educating a generation of how these systems fail and harm people, but we also have the ability to tell our stories with our art. See, when oppressors look to dominate people, they go after their history, their art, and their culture. We're not going to do that in Chicago.
WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. So Heather, we know that the Chicago City Council approved plans for this torture memorial back in 2015 as part of a larger package of reparations for survivors of police torture. Why did this take so long?
The big issue was money, which was why advocates were thrilled that the mayor has earmarked $1.8 million from the Mellon Foundation to build this memorial, in addition to land on the south side and another $1 million from the city's funds. So this memorial will honor the 118 people who were tortured by Commander Burge and those detectives who reported to him. Most of them were innocent, many of them were black men, and some spent decades in prison on charges.
So as we mentioned, the Torture Memorial is one of 8 new memorials that are going to be funded by a nearly $7 million grant from the Mellon Foundation. What other memorials is the city using this money for?
Well, it's really designed to expand the people and the events that are honored by Chicago's public monuments, people who have been overlooked, including Mahalia Jackson. There'll also be a memorial to missing and murdered black women, including Rekia Boyd, who was murdered by, or killed, I should say, by a Chicago police officer.
So plans for those memorials, they grew out of the work of the Chicago Monument Commission, formed by then Mayor Lori Lightfoot in the wake of the social justice protests and unrest of 2020. Why were these memorials picked?
Well, like I said, there are no memorials recognizing real Chicago women. So this is designed to address that. It's also designed to recognize things that happened in Chicago that perhaps have flown under the radar, like the 1919 race riots. So it's designed to be a more complete telling of Chicago's racial history.
A couple of seconds, Heather. That commission also recommended the removal of 13 monuments that have been deemed problematic, including the city's 3 Christopher Columbus statues. Where does all that stand?
In limbo. The Mayor Johnson did not commit to removing those monuments, so they remain where they have been in storage for the past nearly 3 years.
Okay, I'm sure some folks will have some things to say about that. Heather Sharon, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. Paris.
Brandis, 2 organizations on the city's west side are on a mission to bridge the gap between art and sustainability with a new initiative aimed at redeeming plastic. Arts correspondent Angel Ito shares more.
It starts with an assembly line of sorts.
So these are already cut. We usually want to cut them down the middle to make it easier in the cleaning process. So we're going to put them in here.
Washing and drying detergent bottles that have been collected from different laundromats throughout the city's west side.
Then we have to dry it. So we have these drying racks and we label it. This is from Loads of Fun, laundry detergent jug collection site. We then shred the plastics. It becomes these small little granules. And then from there, we put it into the extruder, which then heats it up and then extrudes into a solid beam. And for this, we're making 2x3s for our bench.
That's right. This very bench, which consists of 8 beams, was made from what used to be detergent bottles.
A lot of times we're just driving down the street and you notice like there's not as many benches in the west side. Like this is an opportunity for us to kind of come together, design this object that's accessible for public use and made from a material that will outlive probably everyone in this room.
It's a concept more than a year in the making, spearheaded by the organizations AltSpace and Happy Returns with funding from Earth Art Chicago.
We really loved that art was at the center of this, but so was the community piece, because there are so many different ways for youth and community members to get involved in different aspects of not just developing this art, but also folks will be interacting with it because of the placement in the community afterwards.
It's through a joint project, Redemptive Plastics, that Jordan Campbell says they're able to continue their mission of using both art and faith as a tool to galvanize communities. And it's a concept started by Campbell and his late business partner, John Veal.
So there's a scripture I think about how we are all called to plant seeds and water, and that God's the only one that can allow these things to grow. And I think what we witnessed was John planted those seeds. You know, he was here encouraging, spurring people on, challenging people, but showing love. He talked about how sustainability is truly love over time.
Now, AltSpace has an ideal collaborator in Happy Returns, whose mission is aimed at the intersection of digital craft and recycling plastics. Together, the two groups want to take their love for sustainability as well as their love for community nationwide.
In this project, we've collected and processed about 800 pounds of plastic, and that's just in the last 6 weeks. That's just a small, like, fractional percentage of plastic that's consumed in a day in Chicago. It's not actually how much plastic we can transition and redeem. It's more so this awareness tool of what happens to your yogurt cup. Does it actually get recycled? Through this project and with Redemptive Plastics, the awareness, and it's this tool in the community. We're hiring people, we're training them, and giving them the tools to go out and be artists that work with this material as well. So this is investment in the community, just as much as it's transformation of a landfill.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
The folks at AltSpace and Happy Returns say they're in need of volunteers to increase the production of their benches. If you're interested in redeeming plastic, visit our website for more information. Brandis.
Paris, we know breaking into the music industry is no easy task, but a local working class family is trying to help guide artists through the industry. Reporter Joanna Hernandez stopped by their home in Brighton Park to learn more.
There's no shortage of musical talent at this Brighton Park home. From the vocals to the instrumental, each artist has their niche. This collaboration of artists is working with the record label Nosa Records. Jorge Ledesma and Lupe Martinez created the label in 2021.
Nosa means I don't know, and that came from working in retail, which most of us have a background in retail.
After working in retail during the pandemic, Ledesma wanted to dive into his first passion, music.
The idea just kind of lived in us, and I remember telling Lupe, it's okay to say you don't know something. We carried on as a philosophy now, because then it comes with, what kind of music is this? Well, we don't know, or where do we fit in? We're not quite sure, but it's a reminder.
While the label is relatively new, their band, Aya, has been making music for the past 20 years. They describe their music as sounds from the working class.
I think the art is the most important thing, yes. The art and the music, and we don't stress about the money anymore, like back in the day, oh, maybe we'll make it big. It's not even important, because it's just in our bloodline. We just have to keep on creating to keep the balance of our life, of our story.
Yeah, and that's sort of what we want to embody with the artists we work with.
With their 6-year-old daughter, Ona, the family has opened their 2-flat in Brighton Park to artists looking to be heard.
When we bought this place and had plans to continue making music, the whole point of getting it was to be able to have a space to make it, because Chicago is so difficult for artists to find a place.
Each performer brings something different to the table. There's hip-hop artist Shabaka.
My music has always just been a release for me. Everything I do is about representation and unapologetic self-expression.
Then there's Santrio, bringing the barrio pop Latin flair.
A lot of what our artists are is that they're working in complete obscurity. So, he's not sharing his stuff on social media. He's just working, going home. He's got wife, 3 kids. Yeah. From little village, born and raised.
Tu Butch creates her lyrics into a micro-genre, a fusion of minimalist tracks she makes on the spot.
It's a really easy way to just get art out there, get an idea out there without having to get bogged down by perfectionism.
Lastly, there's Sorcerer.
One thing about Sorcerer is he produces hip-hop in the straightest form, but what makes his music different is that he switches from English to Spanish.
I think we've already provided something for them, an understanding. I think that's the biggest part. They know our story, they know that we pay for everything ourselves, we're very hands-on.
Creating an outlet for artists to explore without the pressures of the music industry.
The music we make is a direct reflection of what's happening in our city, in our neighborhood, in our schools.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
If you're interested in hearing these artists, they'll be performing at Cole's Bar in Logan Square on July 8th. You can also catch other artists at Ruido Fest in Little Village in August.
All right, and that's our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing and get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app, and join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. The home where house music first got its start is set to receive landmark status.
And a new research project aims to track the impact of climate change across Chicago's communities. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to recognize its 18 attorneys selected for the 2023 Super Lawyers List.